Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. I am your host, as always, Charles Hammaker. Here for another week. We have the week of November 15th through November 22nd. As always, we've got Seahawks news this week. We've got a little bit of Mariners news, a nice little touch there to go over with you. Nothing Sounders because their playoff game actually takes place tomorrow, which is really odd just considering, if you think about playoffs, anytime it's not like a series, in basketball or hockey. You just put a standard playoff game on a Tuesday. It's a little odd to me. I don't know how you feel about it. The Storm have been relatively quiet over the past few weeks after the offseason. The Kraken have some news, and the Reign have some news as well, coming off of their semifinals loss in the playoffs. So we'll just get right into it, as we always do. I don't like to waste time here. We get into our Seattle Seahawks news. On November 21st, the Seahawks welcomed the Arizona Cardinals to town, the first place in the division, Arizona Cardinals. The Seahawks would lose that game 23-13. Cardinals did not have star quarterback Kyler Murray or starting wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins for this game. So for the second year in a row, the Seahawks lost to a team led by backup Colt McCoy. That in and of itself is just frustrating to hear. The defense gave up 328 passing yards to McCoy and really failed to cover tight end Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is by no means a slouch in this league, so to allow him to just sort of have his own game and have a good day is frustrating to see when you've got the linebackers that you do and the safeties that you do. So you'd hope that he'd be covered, but 88 yards and 2 touchdowns is a productive day. The Cardinals offense did fumble 4 times, but Seattle was not able to come up with any of them. On the offensive side of the ball for Seattle, the offensive ineptitude continues to plague this team. And, I talked about it last week. I said that, barring a run of the table, run through the rest of the season after this Cardinals game, including this Cardinals game, unless, a win out happened, I think the season's lost. And with that loss to Arizona, key injury to one of your young cornerbacks, and your star quarterback who's coming back from that pin in his finger being removed, not playing like himself, I think it's safe to say that the season's lost. You're sitting at a 3-7 record in a division that has two top teams that continue to win and really aren't going to look back. I hate to say it, but I think right now that the future for Seattle is grim, at least for this season and potentially looking forward, just because, if you look at the drafts, and these last 2 drafts might be the exception. I mean, they still have to play out a little bit, but I mean, since 2013 in those drafts, that area of time from 2013 to 2019, those drafts really have not been productive for Seattle. And drafting in these leagues is so incredibly important and crucial to a team's success going forward in the future of these franchises. To not draft well is a shot in the foot. Playoffs are highly unlikely this year. You don't have your 2 first-round picks these next few years. Russell Wilson's future is kind of up in the air. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not looking good for the Seahawks, and it's a frustrating thing just because of how since about 2012. The Seahawks have been a constant in this city. It's like, all right, the Seahawks are going to the playoffs. It's just going to be about how far they go and if they can get over that hump. Russell Wilson's going to be healthy. It's kind of just seemed like a mainstay. And now I don't know what to tell you. It's difficult right now. We'll move to passing leaders here. Passing leaders, stat leaders. Passing, Russell Wilson completed 14 of his 26 attempts for 207 yards. He fumbled twice and recovered both of those. On the ground, Alex Collins had 10 carries for 36 yards. Kind of odd to see Collins only getting 10 carries as Russell Wilson was 4 for 5 on his play-action attempts, so you'd figure that you'd get the run involved a little bit more, but not was the case. Receiving-wise, Tyler Lockett had a big day with 4 receptions for 115 yards. Tackles-wise, young linebacker Jordan Brooks had 15 total tackles, 11 solo, 1 tackle for loss, and 1 quarterback hit. And nobody was able to log a turnover on the defensive side of the ball for Seattle. Offensive and defensive player of the game. For offense, I had Tyler Lockett, showing up big as a guy in this game where the offense was so decrepit. Tyler Lockett showed up as best he could, and Jordan Brooks. There are several times this year that we've been able to look at the stat leaders and look at defense, and Jordan Brooks has been there. So, props to Jordan Brooks. Kind of thrown into the fire effectively when the team didn't re-sign KJ Wright. Having KJ Wright for another year would not only be helpful for the team's success as a whole, let alone just having another guy to mentor Jordan Brooks. So props to Jordan Brooks, and that's why when I look at those draft classes, I say that these last 2 years you kind of got to wait to see. Because those guys have only been for the 2 years ago, obviously 2 years, and then this year's rookie class, this is their first season. So, props to Jordan Brooks is what I'll say. Injury news: prior to game time, it was announced that Chris Carson will have season-ending neck surgery and is working towards playing next year. Carson's 2021 stats: 54 carries, 232 yards, and 3 touchdowns. With that being said, Carson has not played a full 16-game season in his career. The closest he got was in 2019 when he played 15 games. Carson is a conundrum for me because usually I like to be the positive guy. I like to be optimistic about what's going on with this team. I like to be optimistic about sports in general just because even over the past few years, let alone in the entire history of sports as a whole, there have been so many comeback stories, so many stories of perseverance, and relentlessness. Carson just can't stay healthy. It's just unfortunate. And to have a neck injury, in anything, let alone in life, let alone in the sport, is a crucial thing that you have to pay attention to and you have to be careful with, because the one wrong tackle in that game, paralyzed. If you go back to the Dallas game a few years ago in Dallas, Ricardo Lockett got hit by Jeff Heath on that punt return, and he was paralyzed for a few days. He's able to walk now, but if just a few inches one way, Ricardo Lockett could be in a wheelchair. So neck injuries, it's a big thing to deal with, and I wouldn't be surprised if this franchise is looking for a new running back or somebody to push Carson this offseason, more than likely via the draft. This free agent class is not exactly chock full of running backs that are, you'd figure you look for somebody younger, and this free agent class is not really full of younger running backs. For game day inactives, cornerback DJ Reed was inactive for this game. Obviously, that's a big factor, not having your starting cornerback. Cornerback Gavin Heslop was elevated off of the practice squad in response to Reed not being able to go. Quarterback Jacob Eason, center Dakota Shepley, tackle Jamarco Jones, and defensive ends Robert and Nkemdiche and LJ Collier were both of those defensive ends, as well as the other players, were all game day inactives. Another game where LJ Collier is not active and a healthy scratch. It just goes to show you kind of wonder what the situation was in the trade deadline, as there were rumors that Collier was being shopped and nothing happened. And a report came out that Seattle thought he was too valuable. I don't know how valuable he is if you're putting him as a healthy scratch every single game, Pete, but what do I know? And then post-game, coming out of the Cardinals game, cornerback Trey Brown suffered a patellar tendon injury. If you don't know about patellar tendon injuries, those usually mean season ending. Jimmy Graham suffered a patellar tendon injury in his first year in Seattle and had to rehab the entire year. So, just depends on how he reacts to that and the severity of that injury. And then running back Rashad Penny aggravated a hamstring injury after the first carry of the game. So that might hamper him for the rest of the season going forward. And speaking of Rashad Penny, another note on those draft classes that I was talking about just a few minutes ago. Team-related notes: on November 16th, the team signed linebacker Edmund Robinson to the practice squad. And November 20th, defensive end Carlos Dunlap was fined $10,000 for throwing a Packers player's shoe during the Seahawks versus Packers game last weekend. League news: the NFL has microchips in its footballs to help determine spots. While this is helpful technology, the league does not have them progressed enough to be able to help utilize those chips to determine whether plays are touchdowns or not. So that's something to note. I mean, I'm sure in a few years we'll be looking at that as, we'll be watching a game and you can see that the microchip crossed the goal line. But until then, that technology is not ready for that sort of usage yet. And the NFL is ramping up its COVID-19 protocols. The NFL is instituting stricter health and safety protocols regardless of vaccination status. So we'll wrap up here. The Seahawks sit at a 3-7 record. They are fourth in the NFC West. Looking ahead, Week 12, they will play November 29th at the Washington Football Team over there in the district with a 5:15 p.m. Pacific time kickoff on ESPN. So after a tough game where the Seahawks more than likely saw their season end, get to play on Monday night. Kind of salt in the wound there. As we move over to the Mariners here, as they're continuing their offseason, Scott Service did not win AL Manager of the Year. Instead, the honor goes to Rays manager Kevin Cash. It is his second award of the same similarity. I'll air my grievances here. It was interesting to see this. I get it. Kevin Cash, managed his team to a World Series last year and managed his team to the best record in baseball this past season. But just considering, the talent on that team, I don't know how much different it would be if you put in a standard manager in his spot. And Scott Service's Mariners were 6-1 against the Rays this year. So that's all I'll say. As well as the main piece of Mariners news that we have this week, Ichiro will be inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame. The induction celebration will take place from August 26th to 28th against the Cleveland Guardians, 27th being the big day with a pregame ceremony. Ichiro is still an instructor for the Mariners. He instructs the Tacoma Rainiers when the Mariners are on the road, as well as being an advisor to John Stanton. A big thing for Ichiro here. I feel like it's just a matter of time until his number is retired by the Mariners and his statue is erected outside of T-Mobile Park. If you have been in Seattle, at most likely any point since 2001, you have to know at least who Ichiro is. And if you're a baseball fan, you obviously know who Ichiro is. So just a big moment to have him in the Mariners Hall of Fame. It was a long time coming, I figure. And more than likely, Ichiro will be a first ballot Hall of Famer when he becomes eligible in 2025. Just a little note, as somebody who works in the ballpark just about every single home game, it's always really interesting to see Ichiro out there on the field 2 hours before a game starts, running out there with the guys like he's one of the active players on the roster, going out and playing in the outfield, still jumping, still running. Even I remember I was at the stadium 3 hours prior to first pitch, and Ichiro was out there in center field by himself running dead sprints. Who else do you know? What other athletes would do that, about a couple of years after their playing date? It's remarkable, and it's an honor for Ichiro to be in the Mariners Hall of Fame. It was something that was bound to happen. So we will certainly have to celebrate when that takes place later in August of next year. Looking into league notes, MLB owners will house minor leaguers next year. The league announced on past Thursday that owners will pay for housing for nearly 90% of all minor league players starting next year. Teams will be required to provide housing in a commutable distance from each ballpark. Accommodations must include 1 bed per player and no more than 2 players per room. Player facilities will be furnished and teams will pay for basic facilities. Players will have the option to opt out of club-provided housing if they wish, but that's a big step. If you know anything about the minor leagues, it's really a struggle for these guys until they really hit maybe AAA and get to the bigs, just because for the longest time they weren't housed. A lot of guys, there was a lot of stories out of the Los Angeles Angels camp, their minor league system, where the players were sleeping in cars and they were sleeping on the floor in the clubhouse and just living game check to game check. So that's a nice step to see those guys just get housing, let alone everything else. And then Commissioner Rob Manfred talks up a potential lockout. Says that a lockout that moves the collective bargaining agreement process forward could help avoid future labor disputes, and states that it is about avoiding damage to the season. So that is something to note, as a potential lockout is something that the Mariners could worry about, considering that this is a big offseason for them, and having that pushed back or having to wait further on that signing free agents could potentially be a hindrance. So looking ahead, upcoming schedule, there's not much, just considering it's free agency. So we will continue to wait. I just know that I have a source that said that the Mariners had meetings lined up with 4 important players between this past Thursday and Thanksgiving, and they were all mutually interested parties. So again, I wouldn't put any money on that, but it sounds like the Mariners are active. It just, it's just about them closing the door and sealing the deal on that. Moving over to our Sounders here, there's no actual news. There's no team news. The only tidbit I have on that relation is that Nico Ladero is said to be 100% going into this game against Real Salt Lake. But there's no team news. There's no game recap, just because this game is on Tuesday. I mean, if this was over the weekend, we'd have something to go over, but we do not. So, yes, the Sounders play November 23rd versus Real Salt Lake with a 7:30 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. Yes, you heard me right. 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Kind of frustrating, but that is where the MLS have placed the Sounders for their first-round matchup against Real Salt Lake. If the Sounders advance, they will play Sporting Kansas City upcoming in the next round of the playoffs. Small piece of Storm news. It's not directly related to the Storm itself, but it is WNBA related news. The WNBA will change their playoff format. Previously, the first round of the playoffs was a single elimination game. There will be 3 rounds before the finals now. The first round will be 3 games, best of 3 games. 3 games. The second round will be best of 5, and then the semifinal round before that will also be 5. So it'll be a 3-5-5 format, and there will be no more bye weeks for the highest ranked seeds. So there will be no plan for a bye week this upcoming season and going forward in this 2 playoff format. It will all simply be all the teams will be thrown into it that are made playoff eligible. So looking ahead for the Storm, it's still free agency. A lot of players are still playing overseas and playing in the Euro leagues, and some players are just staying home. So when we get Storm news, I promise we will get it to you. But it's been pretty radio silent for the most part. Heading into our Seattle Kraken here, over the past week, the Kraken played 3 games. November 17th versus the Chicago Blackhawks. The Kraken will lose that game 4-2. Player of the game would be center Yanni Gourde with 1 goal, 1 plus-minus, 4 shots on goal, 4 hits, and 11 faceoffs won. November 19th versus the Colorado Avalanche. Seattle will lose that game by a brutal score of 7-3. Player of the game would be center Colin Blackwell with 1 goal, 4 shots on goal, and 4 faceoff wins. And then November 21st versus the Washington Capitals, the Kraken would snap their 6-game losing streak and win that game 5-2. Player of the game would be center Jaden Schwartz with 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 total points, a 2 plus-minus, 5 shots, 1 hit, 1 block, and a 100% faceoff percentage. So Jaden Schwartz really showing up in that game against Washington. The game against Washington was really a nice, it was a nice bounce back. It was every meaning of those 2 words is exactly what Seattle needed. Those past few games, Chicago was a little bit of a tough one. Same with Colorado. Colorado was brutal. At one point being down 7-0. The key here is, though, if you look at that Washington game, Washington is the 3rd highest ranked team in the league, and you beat them 5-2. It was another game where Seattle got down by a goal early in the first period, but they were able to respond, tie the game up in the first period, and then just be able to go. Didn't worry about having to play from behind. Didn't get into their own heads about it. They played their game. They played tough defense. Grubauer had his best game in a while for this team. The defense had their best game in a while. I think I talked about it last week. A lot of fans have been quick to put the blame on Philip Grubauer. And then against the Avalanche in that 7-goal massacre, Chris Driedger was a starter, the backup goaltender. So it just shows you it's not on the goalkeepers. It's not on Philip. A lot of it's been a lot of defensive breakdowns and just leaving your goalie in bad positions, not putting him in positions to succeed. And something in hockey is that the players will never put the blame on the goalie, and they'll always defend their goaltender. Colin Blackwell in the post-game press conference after the Colorado game was asked about that. He goes, the goaltenders have kind of been the ones to blame for this, and he stopped that immediately. He says, I'm going to stop that right now. The goaltenders have worked their ass off. This is on us, and we have to do better. And they did play better against Washington. That was incredible. You play Alex Ovechkin, who is fourth on the all-time scoring list in the NHL and still going strong, and they were able to relatively minimize him. The defense did a great job. In the second quarter, they were able to work on a lot of counterattacks and get 3 goals in that quarter, all within a 7-minute, 34-second period of time. So that was a good game, and I hope that later on in the season, we're still early in the season here for hockey. We have to play through, I believe it's April. I hope that this Washington game, beating the team with the third most points in the league, we can look at this game later on and say this was a game where Seattle really found their stride and started to pick things up. Because 6 games in a row, man, that's tough. And a good amount of them being at home, that's also tough. So for the Kraken, they sit at a 5-12-1 record. That is 5 wins, 12 losses, 1 overtime loss. That gives them 11 points. Their division standing, they're 8th in the Pacific Division currently. November 20th, they're looking ahead for the Kraken. November 24th, they will take on the Carolina Hurricanes. That is Wednesday here at home. They 7 Pacific time puck drop. November 26th at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Going on the road again. That's a 4 p.m. Pacific time puck drop on Black Friday. November 27th, Saturday at the Florida Panthers, who have the best record in the league. 3 p.m. Pacific time puck drop. So just for reference, Seattle just played the team with the third most points in the league. On Wednesday against Carolina, they played the team with the second most points in the league. On November 27th at the Panthers, they played the team with the first most points in the league. So this stretch of games for Seattle does not get any easier. Just looking at their schedule before the Capitals game on Sunday, Seattle does not play another team that is around the same amount of points as them or worse than them until they play Arizona around mid-December. So it's a tough stretch here for Seattle, but they showed that they can do it against Washington, and you just hope that defenseman Adam Larson said it best in the post-game press conference last night. He said that, I hope the guys look at this and they remember how it feels, and they just go from there, and they just remember how that feels and take that with them. So 3 games next week for the Kraken, 2 of them on the road. Starts on Wednesday. For their next stretch, we look at the Reign here. OL Reign, we have a season recap coming for you next week, just to go over everything that happened this past season. It was a lot that happened this past season. In team-related news, Jennifer Marazon was named to the German national team for the November World Cup qualifiers. In awards news, I told you that past few weeks, the Reign had nominee for Coach of the Year and MVP. We found out that Alana Cook did not win Defensive Player of the Year, but Laura Harvey was named the 2021 NWSL Coach of the Year. This is Harvey's 3rd time winning the award, the most of any coach in the NWSL. She previously received the award in 2014 and 15 with the Reign, when she led the Reign to back-to-back NWSL Shields and Championship appearances. In 2015, she was the first coach to win the award on multiple occasions. This season, Harvey joined the Reign after the conclusion of the Olympics in 2020 in Tokyo, not 2020 Olympics, you know what I mean, and made an immediate impact on the team. There was a rough start of the season where Fareed Ben-Stidi was the coach. Ben-Stidi would resign just an hour before the team's game against Houston, and assistant coach Sam Lady began to set the Reign on the right path, get him back on track. Between the 6 matches that Lady was in charge, the Reign were able to earn 12 points and did not lose. Harvey seamlessly transitioned into coaching the Reign, leading the team to a 2nd seed finish, ending the season with a 7-2 regular season record as the coach. This comeback allowed the Reign to host their first playoff match since 2015. Yes, host a playoff match for the first time since 2015. Harvey being the coach, her contract was extended through 2023, so having Harvey back is a big deal, and you can tell, just through the interactions with the players that having her back as the coach is a big deal. So excited to see what the team's able to do going forward. And then speaking of players like Harvey, Jess Fishlock was named the 2021 NWSL MVP in her first season back since suffering an ACL injury and double meniscus tear in 2019 of July of that year. Fishlock played in 24 matches throughout the season, including one playoff match. She compiled a total of 1,880 minutes played, the second most minutes played by any Reign player this year, just behind Sofia Huerta. Fishlock scored 5 goals and added 4 assists, including a brace against the Red Stars on October 10th to kickstart the Reign comeback in a 3-2 win. Fishlock was named Team of the Month player 3 times this past season, in May, August, and October, and earned Save of the Week once, which is a little odd as she's a midfielder. So to get a Save of the Week honor is pretty impressive. A veteran midfielder who has been with the Reign since their inception. If you watch any Reign games, and as somebody who was watching every single home game, just about every other away game, this team does not run without Jess Fishlock. It doesn't matter how much talent this team's got, whether it's the French players that came over, or having Megan Rapinoe, or having Sofia Huerta, or having 2019 Rookie of the Year Bethany Balcer. This team does not move forward without Jess Fishlock. You know, the term glue gets used a lot as for a player who's really important to a team. If there's a glue for this team, it is Jess Fishlock. She registered a pass accuracy of 76.4% and provided 47 key passes across 23 games. She had a 3-game scoring tear from July 24th to August 8th. She is the second player to receive the NWSL MVP award for the Reign after Kim Little in 2014. It marks her first individual NWSL award since joining the league in 2013. So big congrats to Jess. That's a big deal. Having an MVP and the Coach of the Year on the team is great, but I know both of those women would have liked to play in the championship game, but it was a good season. Overall, it was a good season. And then 5 all-around players were named to the NWSL Best 11, first team and second team. The first team players were defender Alana Cook, midfielders and forwards Jess Fishlock and Eugenie Lesommer. And on the second team, defense Sofia Huerta and Bethany Balcer. In league-related news, the Washington Spirit, who beat the Reign in the semifinal game, would go on to win the NWSL title against the Chicago Red Stars. It is their first title in franchise history. So looking ahead, all the Reign have right now is preparation for the expansion draft. That's a big deal. The expansion draft takes place early December, and it will be for San Diego Wave and the Angel FC in Los Angeles. So the Reign will have to figure out who they want to protect and who they want to expose. That'll be tough because in any expansion draft, those kind of things are difficult. And it'll certainly shape the team out just so they know, I guess, what they have to do in the draft and free agency going forward. So looking at this past week in Seattle sports, Seahawks, the future looks grim for Seattle after a tough loss to Arizona. The Mariners, Ichiro will be inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame in August of next season. The Sounders play their first-round playoff game on Tuesday, which is tomorrow. The Kraken lose 2 of their 3 games, but had a great bounce-back win against Washington and have another key stretch of games this next week. And the Reign, we will have season recap for you next week. With that all being said, if you know about Converge, just about everybody else is in Belize, so it's me and Salman. So props to my director here, getting everything set up. Again, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. I just kind of set up here and I sit down. Salman does the rest. So thank you, directors. With that being said, we will see you back next week after Thanksgiving. So if you're doing Thanksgiving, I hope you enjoy it on Thursday. We will see you back on the 29th. We're getting towards the end of November. That's crazy. We're almost in December. I don't want to do the same cliches. Oh, the year went by fast, but I don't know, man. We're in late November now. It's a little bit wild, Take care. Be well. We will see you on the 29th. Until then, be safe.